Welcome, everyone. Welcome for another episode of Straight Out BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari. As usual, I am Rudy, and on this journey with me is the one and only.
Jamari Jones, everybody.
How's it going, brother? How's it going?
It's going well, man. Working hard. School's been great.
Yeah,
Life has been great. October, I love fall weather.
same.
Yeah, so I love October. I get to wear my sweaters
Yeah.
and all that. So, how about you?
It's been a crazy week. I'm happy it's the weekend. The weather has been it's got good. It's like you say you wear a sweater, but you don't have to wear that heavy stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, the weather's good. The sun is out. So yeah, it feels good. I'm excited. It's the weekend. Get to chance to rest and re-energize you know for next week.
yes, sir. So before we get into this, we just wanted to say thank you for our listeners. Thank you for everyone that is sharing our podcast, telling a friend that maybe told a friend that told a friend about
Yeah,
us. We appreciate it so much. Again, we are found on all social media platforms,
all of them.
um, Instagram, Facebook. You can find our podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify. You name it, we are on it.
Yes,
So
sir.
please continue to share our podcast and support us. We appreciate you guys so much. It means a lot to us.
Yeah.
Um, so getting in, we only have one thing for our views on the latest news
And it's so
because
important, right?
yes, so important. So this early voting, our mayor, we've been talking about it for so long, and we're going to
Yeah.
continue to shine light on it because we feel it's so important for the Boston community. Is our mayoral election. Um, right now we have two candidates, Michelle Wu and Anissa Asabi George. They just recently had another a debate last week, and I wasn't able to catch it, but I did catch some clips. And it seems like they're two good candidates. What I'm finding is that people are polarized. Like it's either they want this one or they want that one. There's no like kind of like in between.
Mm.
But Rudy, what's up with this early voting?
So yeah, so early voting, this is like crucial. There's we done the preliminary. This is it. We are pushing this because as we are doing this platform and advocating for change,
Hmm.
change doesn't come without politics. So we need
Yes.
to get involved and remember. So it's voting and holding them accountable.
Yep.
So the word doesn't end once election is over. If anything, it begins. This is the pre-work right
Mm.
now, getting people in office that we can work with.
Hmm.
So today's Saturday. Well, by the time you hear this, it will be Monday. But voting start today, Saturday, October 23rd, and it's gonna go on to Sunday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you had the BCYF on Paris Street, Jim F. Gordon Elementary School, Richard Murphy School, ABCD Thelma D. Burns Building, another Coastal College in Hyde Park, BCYF Roach, BCYF Shelburne, Central Library in Copley Square,
Mm.
Jackson Main School, BCYF Quincy. All those are available today from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Um,
So you can vote
Today
this
and tomorrow.
Saturday.
Yeah, you can vote today, you can vote
You
tomorrow,
vote.
and then and there's voting in the community on Tuesday, October 26th from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. and on Thursday from October 28th from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. But if none of thing work out for you, you can vote all week at one city hall square in Boston Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Well,
Mhm.
it's on Thursdays 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. So you can vote. There's multiple chance for you to vote early, to not
Yeah.
stay in line. Vote. You register to vote. You make your voice heard. Use your vote. Like there's the mayor, there's the councilor at large, and I know in my district, we have an election too. So depending on if from district, I think 4, 5, 6, and 7, there's
Mhm.
election. So yeah, get involved. Or it, yeah, we need to.
Yeah. So there's ample amount of time to get to vote next week.
Yeah,
Um, Even if you work downtown, go on your lunch break,
yeah,
go vote. Or if you live in the city of Boston and take a quick trip to any of those places he just mentioned,
yeah,
um, we want your voice to be heard. This is very important for our community. One of our things for this season is advocacy, and this is part of advocacy. So
yeah,
let's get out there and vote.
yeah,
Um, so Rudy, what we got today for our
yeah.
episode
For episode 17, we got
17, baby?
we got three guests for you. We're gonna tackle, as Jamari said, advocacy. We're gonna talk about HBCU. There's been a lot of like stigma and misconception about HBCU. So we wanted to bring contribute to a positive narrative. As opposed, some of the things like one of the major things they kind of talk about HBC is like the lack of funding. Yes, HBCU don't give a lot of funding, but we need to ask ourselves why they don't
Mm.
get a lack of funding. Some of the misconception about HBCUs like this lack of diversity, no real world preparation, everyone is woke over there, lack of academic competitiveness. HBCU is ghetto. All they do is partying and so on. So there's definitely be a shift on how we approach HBCU. Even us in our practice, when we started our practice,
Yeah,
we contributed to the stigma and misconception about HBCU, but we had to and I evaluate ourselves like, hey, we need to dive deeper and not hold our student from being going to school built for them by people who look like them. So it's all about figuring out strategy. How do we overcome the financial and the financial aid, the lack of financial aid that comes with it, and learning. We need to talk to HBCU alumni, the product of HBCU, talk about how they made it work despite
yeah,
those stigma and misconception. It's it's conversation needed.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so we want to do this to shine some light on the HBCUs, and also it was College Month.
yeah, college month.
But this is a topic that's not really dived into in depth. I think especially up north.
Mm,
So we wanted to do our part and shine some light on it.
yeah,
So with that being said, let's get into this episode.
let's do it. Thank you all for joining us. We are back for another episode of Straight Out BPS podcast. We are joined by three guests on this episode, and we are talking about HBCUs. We have Manushka, Courtney, and back for a second time around, Jihad. Manushka, how you doing today?
Doing very good. How are you?
Good,
How are
good,
you guys? How is everybody?
good, good, good. So Manushka, can you tell us like your title and HBCU you from?
Yes, I'm a teacher counselor, and I went to the first HBCU, Cheney University.
She emphasized on the first. So, Courtney, which HBCU you're from, and what is your position?
I see how this is going to go already. We got to start throwing the V's in front of it. So I'm the director of partnerships, and I went to the illustrious Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, aka FAMU.
All right. And back for us, second time around, we have Jihad Scudder. You know, Jihad, which HBCU are you from? I mean, we can clearly see it. It's, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
don't know. Jihad Scudder, and of course I went. They say the best for last, but I went to the super duper uber illustrious university called Virginia State University, located in Petersburg, Virginia.
All right, all right. Um, so it's college month, and we wanted to, and as part of our season, we've been focused on advocacy, and we wanted to contribute to the positive narrative towards HBCU, because for as long as I can remember, there's been a lot of stigma towards it and misconception toward HBCU. To name a few, lack of diversity, no real world preparation, lack of academic competitiveness. HBCUs are ghetto. Y'all go there to party. So it's time to clear the space and tell us about your experience. So one thing I like, so knowing all that, or did you know all those stigma and misconception? How did you find out about HBCUs, and why did you choose to go in within HBCU? We can start with Jihad.
Oh, okay, I was gonna let the ladies go first. Well, I think I grew up in an era where HBCUs, there was a lot of subliminal messages about HBCUs through clothing, sweatshirts, T-shirts, on our favorite TV shows and movies. I think we would always see it on the Cosby shows and A Different World, and a lot of the rappers. Snoop Dogg had a Virginia State University shirt on. People wore Howard shirts. So a lot of entertainers were always pushing it throughout the 80s and 90s. But long story short, the first time I even saw anything remotely close was probably school days, and a mixture of school days and A Different World. So that was the first time, I started questioning, what are these universities and shirts, these universities and schools that's on these shirts that these people were wearing. I mean, living single, it was always little, I want to say, just little messages that we would see in our favorite entertainers and our favorite so-called celebrities. So that's why I would say that was my first vision of it. And then I ended up having two cousins that went to Howard University after.
Much like Scudder, the 90s era, and I always talk about for music and television, right? We're just immersed with like positive Black images. And so part of that, you can't talk about Black excellence without, folks tapping into HBCU. So I think growing up with that, seeing that, embracing that, and knowing about it. And then also the other part that influenced me, I think, besides my parents, like my families, I had two older older brother and sister that were down in Atlanta that grew up there. My sister went to Clark Atlanta University, but even before still knowing what that was, I think the other piece of my influence came from, because I came out of MECO, right? I went to school in Newton. And so when I was done with my MECO experience, I was like, I'm not doing the PWI thing. I can't stay in Boston. I need to be out. And I think that needing that cultural context and that affirmation that I felt like HBCUs provided and would provide, like I needed a Black experience. And people say, oh, well, it's not like I wasn't around Black people, but having that secondary education be predominantly in a white setting, to me, like I was hell-bent on being at a HBCU, even coming through athletics and sports, and everybody saying, oh, in Massachusetts being the beam and the hub of education, people always say, oh, well, why would you leave? I feel like a lot of people tell our kids, like, oh, like be in Massachusetts or be up here. We have the Harvards and UMass systems and everything. And I was like, no, my cultural experience and education was more important for me. So besides having that foundation and that affirmation at home and on the screen, through music and TV, like Scudder said, like that was my other big influence. Like low key was like, I need something different. And the HBCUs provided that.
As for myself, I grew up in a Haitian household, single mother. So college was always a conversation as far as that's your next step after high school. I was fortunate enough to, similar to you guys, I seen it on TV. However, didn't really know about HBCUs other than that because my mom didn't even know about colleges, names of colleges, other than the one that she worked at as a dishwasher, which was at Harvard, right? So for her, it was like possibly she may, her daughter or sons may end up there, but that's not what she was thinking, I don't believe. And so I was fortunate enough to go on a college tour in my junior year, and we went to Pennsylvania and we hit up a few schools. We went to the so-called Lincoln University, who addresses themselves as the first HBCU, but I digress. And so I went on that campus and I was like, we went to Lincoln, Temple, and Villanova. So I got a taste of all three different types of schools. And when I got onto Lincoln's campus, Villanova, nice and cute, but just real dark for me. And then Temple, it was lit, but it was in the ghetto, right? And then you got Lincoln, who's in the suburbs. And not that I, coming from Cambridge, not that was my taste, but I felt like I was home for a second. Like I was with my people. I was like, wow, there's Black people everywhere. I see Black professors, Black staff, and I was like, So my junior year left me with an impression that like, this is a possibility that I didn't even know of, and I can't wait to like learn more about it as time goes on and I'm ready to apply for college. So that is my experience.
It's so interesting because I feel like from hearing you guys talking, it feels like you guys were not exposed to the stigma or the misconception. You guys saw your favorite rappers, and you went to a college visit, and you saw and you learned, like you see for yourself and you embrace it. And but I feel like majority of Black and brown students are exposed to the stigma before they are exposed to, because rappers don't promote HBCUs like they used to anymore. So it's so interesting to see like the difference in time and how like we are being influenced into being with our own people. And for the listeners listening, so HBCUs are historically Black college and university, and PWI, because Courtney referred to one as predominantly white institutions. So you're gonna hear those. So this is your vocab for today.
Right. So one of the things I was just jotting down, and I feel like everyone touched on it, was like the culture of that era, right? Like it played a big influence, or you knew someone that went to a HBCU, and it wasn't as stigmatized as we see now. And even like when I was working with as a college advisor, um, and I don't think that the organization, meant any harm, but it was just like based on affordability, and we'll get into that later. But it was just like, they don't give as much money as other students. I mean, as other schools, but we never really digged into the reason why or the history why that was the fact. And I felt like in my job, right, I pushed more students away from applying to those schools, and I feel like that was the culture that was being built, like as we went on to college affordability. But um, it was just it's interesting to see like culture, hip hop, and or like your cousins or something played a big role in transitioning into HBCUs. That's pretty dope. But moving on to the second question, and we're gonna start off with Manushka. What was your experience like at your particular HBCU, and if you were a part of any sorority or fraternity, what impact did it have on your college experience, and kind of what impact does it have on your life now?
That's definitely a loaded question. So I'm gonna try to keep that one really short. So my first day on campus, I want to make it clear I never visited Jamie. I just took what I seen at Lincoln and was like, I want to be a part of this type of community, but just not there, right? And I was okay knowing that I'd never visited. I was okay with pictures. And at the time, I believe MySpace was popping. So I went on MySpace and I did my little search and looked to see who went to that school and started asking questions. And that's how I found more information about the college and agreed to go there. And of course, they had my major, which was in communications. So my overall experience and why I made that decision was just that I was happy to see professors of color. That was my number one. The only professor of color I really kind of had in high school was an African American studies teacher, but that wasn't enough for me. I was like, damn, this isn't my senior year. I should have had this like all 4 years somehow, some way, right? But then I also enjoyed the fact that I was being challenged by people that literally looked like me. I didn't take AP courses in high school, but when I got up in there and I seen that, like, you know, I thought I was smart. Like, I came in there real confident. I was like, I can handle this type of work. But there's some folks in here killing it, and they look just like me. And that broke the stigma for me, because I grew up like seeing like my peers with a bunch of IEPs. I had an IEP when I was younger, and I got off of it because I was like, nah, you're not about to box me in, because I didn't know the benefits. But now, of course, I know the benefits of it. But I also didn't see many of my peers taking AP courses and challenge themselves and I was in sports. So it was nice and refreshing to see that there were people that looked just like me, challenging themselves, doing homework, getting involved in different types of activities. I wasn't part of like any sorority, but I enjoyed watching them. And that was like my first introduction. I was like, dang, y'all real lit over here. Like, this is cool. Like, this is like really building community for me. And then I was lucky enough and obviously talented enough to play volleyball, and I picked up bowling while I was there. Like, there was things for me to like learn and just explore. That's me keeping it short, because there's so much more.
So shout outs to my fellow communication major at the bottom of my screen there. Yes. But HBCU culture, like we talk about that, and I think for experience, and especially from folks from Black people coming up north, into the misnomers you spoke to, Jamari, it's like we have this idea that because we've been in Boston or because we're up north, like we are from this higher echelon of like what education is supposed to be, and the only way that any school can really give you a real education is from being up here, right? Like we bought into that, and we hold in that kind of elitist mentality, I feel like, in the north. And so part of, you know, coming out of Mecca, where you're in a white school system and you're one of few, and just like those classes, you look to your right and your left. And if my parents didn't advocate for me, I wouldn't necessarily have been in those AP classes, or I wouldn't have been talking about like, what are those, what does education look like beyond the basic experience that most of my fellow MECO students had that didn't have that advocacy. And so to Manusha's point, when you're on a Black campus, I think the biggest thing for me from day one, and even when I went on, I forgot to mention the Black College Tour. Like MECO did the last Black College Tour that went to FAMU. Like I was hell bent on being in Atlanta, because that's where my peoples were at. Atlanta was popping, and went to FAMU, and there was just something about the campus. There was something about the Black and brown folks I saw on this campus. And even to the fact that I remember distinctly on the tour, culturally speaking, there was a white boy from the Virgin Islands that was on campus. And I was like, yo, and he was just like, just as there as everybody else. And so to hear like, oh, you know, Black colleges, they don't prepare you for life because they're just all Black. And even that all Black is like keeping us in a box and a monolith. And I feel like up here we've bought into that, or we teach kids that there's only one way to be Black. Right. And so like, if there's not, so there was a diversity even among Black people on FAMU's campus and across HBCUs in general. I feel like West Coast Black people, way different than East Coast Black people, different than down South, Midwest, over the islands, Black folks. And so to have all that on one campus, and yes, you had people in other cultures and places there, but I feel like there was a appreciation I was able to gain and learn in terms of who we are across the diaspora. And I feel like that's not uplifted enough. And then we all bond, and when we have that Black nod, the things that are like Black, like you're in that and immersed every freaking day, even more so than just being in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. Like there's a different kind of pride. There's a different kind of like just experience that HBCU culture gives you outside of, you know, the step shows, homecoming, having Black professors and folks that are pouring into you like every day. I remember being amazed at like down south, you turn on the TV, you go in the grocery stores and everybody's Black. The man that owned the store, or the woman or the business owner, the people on the news. And we grew up on like Liz Walker and Pam, all the people that were like, wow, they're like, we were so proud of Liz, as we should, because she was the first. But it's like there's folks that grew up seeing that every day of their lives. And that's like what being on an HBCU campus is. It's like, yo, it's that affirmation that, to Manusha's point, like Black people do dope stuff. You can get caught up here to feel like even the way people talk about Boston public schools is so negative because it's so Black, right? It's so brown. Like, and we get this misnomer that if it's Black and brown, then that means it's less than. And I think to your point, Jamari, is that like, yo, like even as a guidance counselor, part of the structure that we learn and teach, and because we're in this hub, is that you can't get anything better than Massachusetts or the schools here, right? And so anything else, don't push kids to. We even do it with Boston Public Schools and other schools in the state. We got to get into MECO, we got to get into private school, we got to go to a charter. And it's because those are things that are quote unquote supposed to be closer to this white mainstream idea of excellence in education. And we misnomer that experience, that having Black people in front of you, brown people in front of you, having that cultural connection and people that care about you like you are their own kid matters. And I feel like that's the HBCU experience. And once you step foot on campus, being a kid from up north, I was already like, I was done. I was like, I still tell all my kids, this is the best choice I ever made in my life, was leaving Massachusetts to go to a HBCU.
Can I say one thing? And Courtney, like you just made me think of it. It's like this unsaid like experience that that you guys have, right? When you see another person that has gone to a HBCU, there's like this I don't know what to call it. It's just like this.
It's a VIP club. They make it feel like kids. They be like, yeah. It's like when Kobe say like,
I get so jealous.
Yeah, they make it feel like that. It's a VIP club, and oh, you Black, but you're not VIP.
Yeah,
right.
So you ain't HBCU Black, right?
I think I'll speak towards what you were saying, Rudy. Like you said, like it's almost like you have a sense of VIP. What it is that it's a reflection. You came up with a reflection. It's like growing up in a home of people that don't look like you, right? Say you grew up in that home and no one in that house looks like you. You can't identify with it. And then you see a kid that grew up with his family, people that look like him. That confidence that kid gets, because every time I see a reflection of what I might look like in 40 years, 30 years, that's what you kind of experience in a sense when you go to a HBCU. We can go to school, we can tell our teachers in a lot of these, buildings, oh, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to grow up like me. You can't say that at HBCU because you're looking at, a percentage of people from California, like she said, DC. You get to know the difference between DC and Maryland. The dress codes, the music, the culture is different. Like she says, different types of Black. So you can't use that as an excuse. You can't tell your teachers and professors and the doctors they don't know what it's like. So all the excuses that we typically would have at a PWI, or, Courtney said she went to Metco. I was at Boston College High School. And I initially went there because I wanted to go to Boston College. So that's why I wanted to, where I wanted to go. And by the time I graduated, I was eagled out. I didn't want to do anything remotely close to that. And then when I went to that school, my experience was different because I always like to learn. But I got around teachers that looked like me and reflected positions of power without feeling like they sold out or feeling like they had to become something else in front as if they were something else to maintain that power. And I think that's something that we're seeing right now in the world. People are selling their souls for status. They're selling their souls to portray an image, or caught up in presenting an image that's not realistic. And when you go there, you're forced to look in the mirror. Because now I meet somebody next door to me that's from New Jersey, that's from Brooklyn, that grew up in the same type of household I had, or a similar household. I got to learn the Southern culture was different. I got rid of a lot of the elitist attitude that I felt like, that I learned. I don't want to say I felt like, that I learned that I had it. I didn't realize I had, because I had to reflect against, look at the reflection of somebody that's from the South and what they grew up with and the standards that they grew up with. The yes, ma'am. To this day, I still say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. I smile and I say hi to people that I don't know. That was something I wasn't doing before. So, in a nutshell, I just think that we're striving to get back to that in America, amongst other places, to learn amongst our own and to teach our own. And the reason why you don't see that in hip hop, or it happens, don't think, Beyonce and them wasn't mainstream. Don't pay attention to those marching bands. You get what I'm saying? But what they're doing is they're not being as intentional in showing those images, because they saw the product of that, and it doesn't generate money on the other side. So I just want to, throw that in there. I can't tell you anything more about the experience, because I think that they covered it. But that's what it is. What you're noticing is an immense confidence, not an arrogance, but an immense confidence, because we realize we have no limits. We was taught that all the way. You get what I'm saying? So when we leave there, when you see someone else that has that immense confidence, you don't even have to know they went to a HBCU. It kind of comes up in conversations like, what school you went to? And then they say it, then it's like, yo, now we have a different connection. But it's the immense confidence that my mother can teach me that. My father can teach me that. The teacher at school that doesn't look like me, doesn't know my experience, can't teach it the same way, because the connection is not the same. So that's the best way to say it. That's why a lot of HBCUs, we carry it like we're family, because the structures at those schools are set up like families. Those teachers are like your mothers, your aunts, your fathers. The president of the school comes down to the ground level and walks around in the cafeterias and stuff like that, and and dances and hangs with you. That's realistic. You go to a lot of these PWIs, you probably never meet the president. Nope. You probably never talk to him, you probably never shake their hand until graduation. You get what I'm saying? So that's what I would say is the family oriented nature of those schools. And if you go into the history and the essence of those schools, it started from the core and started from the crops, literally started from nothing. So when you have something that's built up by the people, for those people, it's going to have the biggest impact on those people.
Yeah. One of the things that you have me thinking about, Jihad, is that the feeling going to a HBCU and feeling empowered, right? And then a lot of the time I went to a PWI and I didn't feel as empowered on that campus because I always felt less than everybody else and felt like I always had to work 10 times harder. Not saying that if you go to HBCU, you're not working as hard, but it's a different experience because you're seeing people that are like you on campus and then being taught by professors that look like you and seeing, like you said, seeing people in positions of power that reflect you. So I just wanted to highlight that as well because it's a different experience. And sometimes, to be honest, I felt like going to a PWI did me more harm than good. In the way I had to unteach myself a lot of things that I learned, like you were saying. But I did want to ask, are any of you guys a part of any sororities or fraternities? And like, how does that impact like your life? We can start off with Jihad if you want to share, and then go to Courtney and then Manushka.
Yes. I'm a member of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Some of y'all call them Q dogs. I say Omega Men or Men of Omega.
Yeah, you're a dog.
Huh?
You a dog?
Some people say Q dogs. I say Omega.
I was trying to see if he was gonna correct me. He did.
Yeah, man.
He's
you know,
refined.
huh? You said he's refined?
I said he's refined right now. He's a man of Omega.
I'm a man of Omega, you know? It was a time, I guess I was a cute dog in 2002, 2003. But yeah, that was something that came like, it's funny, when I left for school, I was like, I'm not joining one of those. Because, you know, in our city, I didn't really see the fraternities around. You know, as I'm older, I realized this person was part of this fraternity and this, that, and the third. But to me, they look like college gangs. So I was like, I'm not leaving the inner city to escape things like that, to go to school, to, excuse my language, but get down with somebody. So I went to school with the, you know, the eyebrow raised, like, yo, you know, these people look crazy. And I end up, like I said, being in classes with a lot of people. We had all 9 at my school, and the school promoted it. All the, you know, professors with different organizations. Prior to even becoming a member of Omega Psi Phi, myself and about 32 other members started a social organization about entrepreneurship called Future African American Millionaires, or called FAM. So we was already trying to network then. And if I go through FAM now, there's members from all Divine Nine in a sense. But I wasn't really trying to do that. I just, as time went on, I ended up hanging with more people that kind of resembled the images I knew from being at home. In my chapter, New Side chapter, they wear bow ties, that self-tied bow ties every Friday. And growing up, the people that was in the Nation of Islam that I knew that was from the city wore bow ties. These same guys had braids and wore Timbs. You know, they weren't, in my campus, we don't wear gold boots, so they was wearing Timbs. I was coming from a city where we wore Timbs. So a lot of those things, I was like, these guys are like me, but then they dress up on Fridays. Like, these are the same guys that look, you know, excuse my lady, look like cute dogs on the weekdays, but then they're, you know, they're doing service. So the more I was around and the more I was interested, and physically, I was like a skinny dude. So I didn't look like the typical cute dog. These dudes were all football players. But, you know, I kind of approached it like, I don't look like you guys, but, you know, I'm trying to see what it's about. And one of my classmates, he was older, but he was just like, yo, go read about it for a year and see if that's still what you want to do. And that's what I did. So the scholarship part of it is what caught my eye. I was on the dean's list, so I didn't really have to do anything. Some people barely make the grades, but I didn't really have to do that. And like I said, I had roommates and friends that were part of other organizations. So we didn't have that gang mentality. I don't do anything now because I'm Omega Psi Phi I wouldn't do as Hbcus, a regular, you know, individual. A lot of people don't even know that's the fraternity I'm in. Not that I'm ashamed, but they don't know that. I want them to know me as an individual first. And then on the back end, they're like, you know, yo, Omega, like, yeah, you know, I've been around for a while. So actually, I'm about to make 20 years. So I've been in the frat for it'll be 20 years in April. So it's something I love. The president at the school, Moore, who's no longer the president, the new president's actually an alpha, real good brother. But he was a Q. You know, speaking of Black TV shows, his niece was the girl from off of In the House, Campbell. So she used to come to the campus, so that, you know, that helped. You know? But this is the different people, the different connections I had. I found out later that they were men over Omega, they was alphas. So it wasn't one of those things, but it was something that I learned that I was like, wow, these brothers are cool brothers. And to this day, I do a lot of work with men of Omega. But just the feeling of knowing there's other people that was like you and look like you, move like you, talk like you, and they happen to be a part of this organization. And then last but not least, we have 4 cardinal principles: manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, in that order. So to me, that was my life. I had to learn how to be a man first. And then becoming a man, I had to seek scholarship, right? And, you know, college wasn't easy, you know, financially for me, or just life in general. So I had to persevere. And then now coming back, doing the work I do, we're doing uplift. So I actually was living the frat long before I knew what the frat was. And that's not just a plug, that's just reality. So when I saw manhood, scholarship, perseverance, uplift, you can't say it in any other order. It's like, wow, that's my life, you know? So that's pretty much how I got into that organization. You know, I can talk about the parties and all that stuff too, but I can also talk about the service and the blood drives and the fundraisers, because that's what you'll see me do. I used to do brunch and ball across the street from my job now. I don't even play basketball, but I had a pretty good basketball program because it was dealing with youth. And then years later, I ended up joining my job, and I'm working with those same kids, some who I just watched graduate the last 3 years. So it just shows, and that's the uplift part that had nothing to do with, anything else. And I was able to do it in my community. So I just think I was blessed and fortunate to have that experience, period.
Courtney and Manisha, did you guys join a sorority?
I did not love watching it though. I had friends who joined, and I was more so focused into sports. So my 4 years was straight up sports, and that was its own world itself.
I didn't pledge anything as well, much like Manushka. I was in athletics, so my girl gang was a girls basketball team. Like I think even athletics at HBCUs are gonna be different than at PWIs, and just what that is on top of everything else. I always joke about when I'm talking to my athletes I coach now about, during our homecomings, and then the big Greek shows of the spring is when Florida State, because Tallahassee, FAMU is in the same city, like literally like 3 miles down the road from Florida State, and they used to bring their recruits. They always used to plan their recruiting trips for their football players, the basketball players, whoever it was. They planned it during our homecoming or our events that the Greeks did during the school year, because they'd be like, hey, you're at state, but you also got this coming down, like down the road and whatnot, because of just what that culture was and knowing what it was. So we helped Florida State get plenty of athletes, I'm sure, coming to their campus as a PWI. But I never pledged, but I feel like that's the other piece of, like, if folks are familiar with HBCUs, Pan-Hellenic Council across the country, like, help, with what that positive affirmation is for HBCUs. As much as you hear about the pledge and stuff and how things have gone bad, like, I feel like part of what's held HBCUs for most Black folks in light is, like, because they can relate to, like, they know the Deltas, AKAs, they know the men of Omega, the Alphas, you know what I'm saying? Like, they've seen that, and that's a reflection and a connection point to them. So I feel like those organizations play a vital role in keeping HBCU culture vibrant and strong and relevant, to our folks, especially our young people who may have no other connection, but knowing that, a lot of those organizations were birthed on the campuses of HBCUs.
I also wanted just to quickly add, in addition to what Courtney's saying, these organizations really do help the campus life, right? It's like they're in charge of, putting other students in position to volunteer or know more about certain things that are happening around the world, because they're out there sharing information. And of course the parties, when they throw the parties, it's like, that's something to do, right? It's like that organization is doing it, great. And we know the vibe that we're gonna get depending upon which sorority or fraternity is throwing that party. We know how to come through or how to step back, whatever the case. But I definitely do appreciate all of them, because it gave me another outlook, like what sisterhood and brotherhood looks like, right? And what I would like to strive for when I am building relationships with people, because I did see on the outside how connected everybody was, and that was like a great representation on how I would like to live my life as well.
Yeah, and to that, Manushka, too, like we talk about, those old boy networks or those Ivy League networks and the things that, like, going to PWIs are supposed to be a benefit to us and whatnot, as folks, like, why choose that school? And like, we'd be remiss if we don't talk about those connections, like that HBCUs, Greek organizations, even athletics on HBCU campuses. I know some of my best friends, like, still now in life, are going to be my teammates, right? Not the Greek relation, but across the board, So when we say, hey, like, you go to these schools because you get this network or that, whatever. I know the Greek organizations for life, like, that's part of the mantra, right? Like, you never will have your brother and sisters not being able to be in a position to be successful. And so just like you can say, hey, if you show that Harvard whatever pinned in when you go in somewhere, you put that on your resume, it's an automatic job. I feel like the HBCU network, the Greek network, isn't in the same way. Like, those relationships and that social capital is very much as strong, if not stronger, than what they tell us about, the being able to be connected to an Ivy League or whatever those, other PWI, kind of like cohorts are supposed to be able to give you. I think that gets slept on when we talk about that connect for Black and brown folks that come out of HBCUs.
Thank you, Courtney, because you segue us into that question, and I kind of made a list because I felt like you guys answered that question. So the question was, what do you guys feel you get from HBCU that you couldn't get from a PWI? And I made a list of the things that I've heard from you guys. I'm starting with the network is as strong as an Ivy League. It's a family. The college president, they come and hang out with you. I've seen a video of this college president crossing this kid. It was at your school, Jihad.
Sure was. Sure was.
Yeah, so it's so dope. So you see, it's not just talking about it, it's being about it. So professor of color, which dives in that, always stress about how representation matter. And Manisha, you said something challenging. You're challenged by people who look like you, which is so dope. Is there anything we want to add to the difference? Anything we're missing out?
Can I add?
Yeah.
So I think the segue was into networking. I think the hardest thing for our people to learn is how to properly network, or how to trust each other with our careers and trust each other's with our connections. I think that's the piece that a lot of us learn either on the back end after college, or some of us learn during college. The reason why I think it's so strong at HBCU is because most of the campuses in some cases are smaller. For instance, like Courtney's campus is way bigger than my campus. You know what I'm saying? Like their football stadium looks different than our stadium. The difference is when I deal with a lot of my friends, because a lot of my friends went to PWIs, a lot of them. They would go on our friends list when I was on Facebook or Instagram, like, you actually know all those, 2,000 people? I'm like, yeah. And even if I didn't know their name, some of them I learned their names on Facebook. I can tell you where they was from. I never been to a state where I couldn't call somebody that could call somebody that can meet me at an airport, that can meet me at a station. As a fact, my mother went to Florida last year. Speaking of the crossover, segue, that crossover was during the pandemic. So even when people were socially distancing themselves from each other and had masks on, you saw that happen. You get what I'm saying? So the connection is that deep to where even in the midst of emergencies, there's still socializing going on. But what I'm saying is my mom went to Florida, and a frat brother called somebody like, yo, I think Jahad's mother's down here. And my mother sent me a picture with them outside the hotel because they went to go link up with her. You know what I'm saying? And that's off the strength that maybe I let that person use a ramen noodle from my room when he ran out of a pack, or gave this person seriously, like that serious, gave him a scoop of detergent in our freshman year. They don't forget those things. So the connection, people that kind of struggle together, you kind of bubble together. I think that's a place where the iron sharpens iron. So the network is huge. Even, speaking on, I always say Greek letter organization because I never want to be misconstrued and called a Greek. I remember a Greek letter organization, but the Greeks learned in Africa. So I always want to pay homage to that piece. But even in our campuses, I don't have to necessarily be Omega Psi Phi to get a connection through Omega Psi Phi. That president that I mentioned, he's an alpha. You get what I'm saying? And it's not like, oh, he's part of that. There was also a lot of social organizations that I wanted to make it, because only so many people were part of the Greek life organizations on those campuses. But there's a lot of social networks before Facebook, before MySpace, right? There were social networks on these campuses that a lot of people can call someone who might not even finish graduating because they didn't have the finances, and they can still tap you into somebody else. That's something that was huge. Me and Courtney didn't go to the same school, but I could be talking to her about something and she pick up her phone and say, let me call my people that was working at this TV station down, because they know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. When you go to PWIs, and I know because I've been on those campuses a lot, some people will graduate at graduation and won't know 80% of the people walking up to accept the award because they never even ran into them. That is a fact, right? So the network, you almost, when you go to meet those people, and I'm not dissing it, it's just that when you go to, hey, can you tell them I had class, I lived on this campus, I lived here on this during this year, and you go through, did you know this person? Did you know this person? Just to make a connection. For us, it's degrees of separation. I might not even went 10 years before you or 10 years after. What dorm you stayed in? I stayed in Bird. My sister stayed in Bird. Hold on, let me call her. You get what I'm saying? That makes a difference. My sister went to Hampton. My cousin went to a different school, but I can utilize their connections. And I think that's something that in our communities, we struggled with, right? In our respective communities, in our urban settings, we have a hard time sharing. We have a hard time passing connections for fear that we'll be left out, for fear that we'll be taken advantage of, for fear that we'll be exploited, right? So when we get those campuses, that's the last thing we're worried about. We're worried about it at first when we first get there, but then over time you realize that ain't that connection you think you had, that isn't nothing. And by the time you graduate, you won't even feel it at graduation. You might not even feel it your first 5 years. You'll realize it 10 years down the line when somebody sent the plug through off the strength. And I'm that serious. I have a guy that I'm friends with to this day. And the reason why we got cool was off a hot pot. Off a hot pot. I had to boil something. There was no microwave, and he had the hot pot, and the word traveled. No joke. That boy could stay at my mother's house tomorrow if he came to Boston. That is a fact. Off a hot pot. So what I'm saying is, we have people we grew up with all our lives in our communities that we can't even borrow a hot pot. Never mind get a connection from them. You get what I'm saying? So when we go to schools, because the life we live is predominantly white. I don't want to say an institution, but we're institutionalized by predominantly whites, right? We had that same attitude. So when we get to those campuses, it's the same way. It's like a microcosm of America, right? But when we go to these schools, we get to see what it could be like if we all united. What it could be like if we're the majority and not the so-called minority. What it could look like if the president was Black. My president was Black long before Obama. You understand what I'm saying? So those are the things that I think that like we do get from those schools, that you almost have to see it to believe it. Because Courtney can tell me a story and it sounds crazy to someone else, and I'll laugh because I have a similar story. But when you talk to people that never seen it, it's like, yeah, right, it can't be that well, because we can't see our people really unite in that way. We can't see our people really moving that way. So that's what I think it reiterates, the idea that actually exists, that Wakanda actually exists in those areas. You get what I'm saying? So sorry, but that's what I see. And that's the connection I know. I had seen Courtney 3 years in passing at work, and it wasn't until we shared the office that we even talked about HBCUs. And it was off a smidgen of a conversation, Courtney. Yeah. And then after that, it's like now we're making jokes off of whose school was founded here, who did. That's the joke. But if I need a connection,
It's 1887.
1882. So, I ain't gonna talk cash because there's somebody in the room that's about to trump us both. Wait,
we shouldn't have started throwing out numbers.
I know. But that's what I'm saying. You see that? Like, that's the joke. That's the battles y'all see on TV, but it ain't real. The alphas don't like the Qs, and Qs don't like this, and the deltas don't get it twisted. Some of their best friends are the opposite. Yeah. So in all reality, it's still about unity. And some people gonna have their differences. We're all from different places. We all have different backgrounds, but we're meeting together. And that's what I think those schools push, is that unity, the real idea and visual of that.
And that's that Black excellence on top of that. So that was my number one answer. We all said, hey, like what wouldn't have we received at a PWI is Black excellence, and that representation and reflection that we started this conversation on. Because I feel like as excited as we were about Obama becoming president because of that representation, or here in Massachusetts when Ayanna, upset and got that congressional seat, like having that pride, like that's on your HBCU campus every damn day. You know what I'm saying? And like, imagine being impacted like that on a continual basis. Like, imagine how dope that we would think we are if we think of our young people in the schools right now. If they could experience that, like we don't get to experience that in the way that we should up here. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you get it in pockets. And that's one thing I will say about whenever folks argue to me about MECO and BPS, because that's always seems to be the big thing. Like, BPS has the potential to be a HBCU type of scenario if we weren't limited sometimes in just the system of Massachusetts education in the way that it doesn't allow Black excellence to thrive. But when you have those pockets of those kids you're making connections with, when we create experiences that uplifting Black culture across the diaspora inside our schools, and not even just BPS, but schools in general across Massachusetts. It's one thing whether it's Afro-Latina, if it's Black American, like if kids had that, read that affirmation every day, if every day could be like seeing Ayanna Pressley with her bald head kicking ass on every platform in this thing, and we say, hey, she's from Massachusetts. That's our congresswoman, right? Yeah. That's how we feel at a HBCU and what HBCU is giving. People sleep on it. They say, oh, that's not important. It's not the real world. But no, it's not the real world, because the real world tells Black and brown folks that they're secondary to mainstream. At HBCUs, they don't want to push that narrative, because look what we've overcome as a people for 400 years since we've been on this in this country, right? And that affirmation is the reason why you have folks here in there, when you see Black excellence, you're like, oh, it seems so like not normal. But if you come from an HBCU, that's regular. That's the expectation. That's the norm. And you're trying to achieve that. And it's not like at a PWI where somebody might just be saying, oh, okay, Mr. Athlete, or oh, you're gonna do this job. Like, oh, it's great. You're like an anomaly. You know what I'm saying? You're one of the good ones that made it through. No, you haven't been to my campus. Because the expectation is that's how all of us are, and what potential it taps into that potential.
Right.
Thank you guys. With that being said, we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Straight Outta BPS podcast. We are back discussing HBCUs with our guests. We're gonna get back into it with our fourth question. We are going to start off with Manushka, go to Courtney, and then end with Jihad. And so the next question is, how do you think HBCUs are viewed today versus back when you were in high school? Were they viewed any differently?
High school, it did not exist until my junior year. I didn't know anyone in my family that ever went to HBCU up until probably my generation, right? So, yeah, it didn't exist. However, today I believe it's positively more viewed now than it was before, because now we have access to more information, we can learn more. There's a lot of students who are doing really great work outside of their academics that is being shown. Even when I go on LinkedIn, I'm still keeping up with the students that are at my university, and I see the great work that they're doing, and I notice that, these students, I feel like they're granted more opportunities to shine. I don't know how else to explain it, but the internet is a wonderful thing, right? So we're able to see the growth of HBCUs versus back then, where you're probably working through a pamphlet and you're just, you see the smiles, and that's probably what helps you make a decision. You're like, they look happy, and then you see photos of a dorm, you're like, I can live in that, that's straight. I lived in a project, so anything beyond whatever, I can get used to it. It's not a struggle, right? So I believe that, HBCUs is definitely, there's probably still people out there that are looking at it in a negative light, mainly because what's being exposed. But I feel that every school has dirty laundry, right? Whether PWI or HBCU, and it's just the PR about it, right? Who's on that PR team to make sure that it's not as exposed to the rest of the world? So that's my piece.
Yeah, I would agree with Manishka on that. I think that as we talk about growing up in the 90s and whatnot, and we had that affirmation via a lot of times music and entertainment. But yes, the education of our folks around HBCUs, there's a lot more energy now where folks are looking at HBCUs in the light that how we were like at that time. And a lot of that is, yes, because of the advent of social media and just technology and just folks getting able to be out there, and athletics in a lot of ways, right, too. So there's different things. There's folks that have graduated now that are doing dope things that, like, look, our VP, you know what I'm saying, of the whole country has put Howard and R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman and your P. Diddy's and Beyonce's and Coachella. And so the feel that as Black culture has even elevated and grown in the way that it has, or music-wise, or the traditional ways of media has played a big part, just like it did for us. And now it's just like kind of like on steroids with it. So folks, like the amazingness of it is there, but for the average person too, the same stories keep getting told. And I blame those on our educational institutions, secondary, right? So as you were talking to Jamar, like a lot of those folks talk about the money that's not there, or how folks are mishandling things. Like you always hear the negative when it comes to Black anything, right? Just like we do with small businesses, just like we do with anything else. We already have this lens of criticality on our institutions. So when one thing happens and it blows up like it's the worst thing, you know, in the world, and those things kind of hurt HBCUs more than if it happened at, you know, BC or whatever. You can talk about the Vatican and other things, like things that are like just mainstream, it's just that institution. But if something happens at one HBCU, then it's like, see, that's what I told you about them HBCUs. You can't do this because blah, 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 and yada, yada, yada. So that's still part of like the issue and what we're having, because as much as folks are educated on like what they're seeing on TV, there's still those things that when it's about people going there, when it comes to their personal pockets or their personal things that they have to make decisions for, those that make you choose a college, I still feel like there's some issues that folks deal with. And a lot of that has to do with like, in your question, is the financial pieces, right? It always comes down to money for us. It's like much of the world. Like we have to make decisions based on, can I afford it? What's it gonna take? How's it gonna impact my family? What do I have to do to support my family? So although this experience and this higher learning for us could be so Blacknificent, the realities of the mainstream world that we live in still keep us from being able to go do that. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that part of something that's going to be the monkey on the back of HBCUs is those financial aid pieces. But we just did the college fair, my alumni group, the college fair that BPS did last weekend. And the questions for Black folks, I heard they don't have the scholarships. How are they with financial aid? And those are valid questions for any institution right now, because college is expensive as hell. And that's why you have a lot of folks saying like, oh, I'm not doing college. And we're pushing kids to go to set like different type of scenarios. But like our positioning in this country, as you said, Jamari, about like, hey, you had to work 10 times as hard at those PWIs, and then we got to come out and still in this mainstream world and get a job and prove ourselves, that as many Black kids that we're telling, you know, you don't got to worry about college. You know what I'm saying? Like, is that really realistic for everybody? Like everybody's can't be a mechanic, go start a business and stuff like that. And like that piece of paper, that diploma is still going to make a damn difference in our lives for a while. And so when we tell somebody, don't go to HBCU and get affirmed because they might not be able to give you $50,000 in scholarships, but stay in Boston and try to go to one of your other colleges that already cost more than it's going to cost you to go to that HBCU in 4 years, in the 1 year that you'll attend at that PWI. You know what I'm saying? So when we talk about that money, we don't do enough of those conversations. BU is $75,000. BC, Harvard, all of them, $80,000. I bet on right now, if I look back at what FAMU was costing out of state, I'm not paying $70,000. If I pay $70,000, I'm gonna pay that in 4 years, as opposed to that 1 year of school. So yeah, they might not give you a whole bunch of money necessarily, or you might have to work harder or dig harder for scholarships, but let's educate kids on what the reality of staying in state and going to school is, or going to Connecticut and going to school, compared to going to an HBCU that might not be able to have those endowments, that doesn't have the big scholarship dollars and whatnot off rip. But how can we educate kids about, let's look for some different kind of scholarships, right? Or let's look for some different kind of aid, and what does that really mean and whatnot? Because at this point in life, I think actually one of our coworkers was saying the other day that Steve Harvey had said some quote about, you know, loans and financial aid and stuff like that, and how because of our country, right, Black folks aren't coming into life with generational wealth or families that have money. So no matter what we do to get ahead right now, we're gonna have to take some L's, quote unquote, in our early part right here to make sure that we're able to set ourselves up for future success and set our next generations up, basically. Like, we're at a disadvantage, that's what it is. And so if we let loans or let these things like handicap us from achieving certain things, and we're still going to stay in a subservient position. So we got to like kind of do a better education for our young people to kill some of these things that keep them from going to get this black education, and that's going to enhance them even more than what they think these other degrees are going to do.
I think they hit all the nails on the head. I think a lot of times when we're nervous about things as a people, we make excuses instead of making it happen or making an opportunity for ourselves. A lot of times we know what it is to stand in line for a pair of sneakers, but we want to stand in line for financial aid. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes it's what you're willing to wager to gain. What you say?
Why you coming at me, Jahad?
Oh, no. No, I'm serious, right? But you stood in line for your education, though. You get what I'm saying? So I'm talking about the people whose priorities are the sneakers, right? Not the funds that got you those sneakers, because somebody else didn't buy them for you either, Jamari. You get what I'm saying? So I think a lot of times, like she said, like the amount of money, my brother went to St. John's. He was the only one out of us that wanted to go to a D1, right? PWI. And the amount of money that my mother was spending for him, he got some scholarship. The amount of sacrifice my mother had to make for him, and I'm not taking away from him, was if you took myself, my sister went to Hampton and put our stuff together, she paid way more for him to go there for his 4 years, in a sense, right? And we left out the same, I don't want to say the same way, we all got the same degree, right? And our experiences were different. And I'm saying that because we all grew up in the same household, but the debt was different, right? The experience is different. I go visit my campus, like I'm mad I'm not down there right now, right? I can't tell you the last time my brother went to his campus. I can tell you the last 3 pictures I took on my campus without homecoming, because I go down there to reach people. So I say, going back is like you make the sacrifice for what you want. You get what I'm saying? If you got to go and work a couple of jobs, because let's look at the graduating classes and what status people automatically have. The generational wealth is what keeps those PWIs going, right? The donations back to those schools and people funding the program because they want to see those same players play in the NFL later, right? That's what's keeping that money going. When you go down south, you see the military and the colleges fund those economies a lot of times. You can tell that. When you're up north, you have those entities, but you also have the governmental, the government entities that's helping. And, this president graduated from my school. So everyone's going to go there just off the strength that person went there. And then now we're learning, oh, this person went to that school. It's the confidence. Like when I teach my kids, I show my kids people like Wale and his network. Wale was at Bowie on a scholarship, went to Virginia State on a scholarship. His first album was called Attention Deficit, right? But if you look at his circle, Black Cobain, his manager, a lot of them went to Virginia State, right? So when I'm showing my kids, that's what I'm showing them, right? They see Mayweather and they're not looking at a lot of Mayweather's camps. The Pete Railers, all of those guys, they went to Virginia State. My mother remembers them from the college dorms. So you also have to push that the same way these other schools are pushing their agendas, right? Because that's what it is. They're pushing their agendas. Why can't we push ours? So that's what we have to do. The financial aid is always going to be an issue. $50,000 loan, $20,000 loan is still a loan. The percentage you got to pay on it is still the same percentage. Is it going to be harder for that school to throw you the same amount of money as another school? No, because the percentage is going to be different. 20% of $50,000 is different than 20% of $20,000. So it's going to be a lot harder, and they have to spread it. They have to spread less money a lot thinner, right? To keep their engine running. Some of these schools, the engine's running before anybody even hits the campus, right? So that's the battle. And I think we got to push, like, what are you willing to sacrifice so your experience can be good? No, it may not glitter on the outside, but when you get in there, you're part of what makes it illuminate, right? You add the light to that school. Because then my kids say, my dad went to that school. They don't even care about the status of the school. I want to go there because my dad went there. I want to go there because my aunt went there. I didn't want to go to Howard. I had 2 cousins that went to Howard. You know what made me think Howard was dope? Because she was there when Shy was there, the singing group. I was like, you know them? Right? But when I went to school, Trey Songz was down the street. You get what I'm saying? These people were visiting these campuses. So it made something illustrious to me, but that story wasn't coming home unless I brought it home. So you're going to hear about Harvard and all those things every day because we get off the green line and the red line and they're right there.
Yeah.
But when you're in DC, they see Howard all the time. So
Yeah.
the push is there. You got to see it to believe it. You got to believe it to achieve it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's so interesting because Courtney, you pointed out like, like one thing happened, like, one bad interaction, or like if we're talking about the financial aspect, like how we tend to associate everything negative that comes with, we promote the negative, uh like everything negative about HBCU, because forget the experience, it's just, you cannot afford it, that's what we promote. And even I would say that in my practice, I didn't find out about HBCU till college, and when I started in this field, I heard that, don't go to HBCU because of the you don't get money. So I never thought about it and started preaching that to the kid until I'm like, no, let me find out why. Like, why are we not getting, why are they not getting enough financial aid? Why they have to take those loans? And one thing I like now I changed my narrative is like, hey, you want to go with, now we want to go to a HBCU. um let's start looking at scholarship. Let's start, like, looking for the money and making it work. It's not like, no, don't apply. Let's strategize on how we can make it work, which is gonna segue into our next question. How did you make it work? What was your strategy in terms of financial aid? How did you guys make it work? We can start with Jihad, and then Courtney, and then let's go.
tuition management systems, aka a payment plan. That was the first step. I'm be real. Um, 'Cause we didn't have all that money up front. I was the first one in my immediate family to go. So that was the sacrifice, I would say. I also had to get a job. I worked at a Food Lion, which was almost like well, it is a supermarket. I worked at UPS. Don't get mad. UPS is hiring. Like, I took that line literal and really had to do that. Um, and then you find ways. Like, at one point, if you moved on campus, off campus, and got an apartment, after a year, you can try to file for in-state tuition, which was significantly lower than the out-of-state tuition. By some stacks. So I moved off campus after my freshman year. And then eventually, like, the campuses got hip to that. So your parents had to pay taxes in that state for you to qualify. But like, those are the type of loopholes we was taking. All right, they'll catch on by next year. But tuition management made a difference. Payment plans, waiting in line to see if you can get it, and also making connections, because when the people at the bursar's office or the financial aid department and stuff see you enough, and they ask to see your grades, and then you build these relationships, right? This network, again, they start pointing you in the directions of grants. They start pointing you in the directions of people that can help you. I made a comment, I'll pass it on to them, but I made a comment about how I had a RE, rest in peace, Mr. Thrift. He was the RE, he was in charge of the dorms. And I was on the dean's list freshman year, right? I bust my behind because I was like, yo, I can't mess up. I don't got a second chance. So I was busting my behind, and my mother got paid once a month from her job. Well, really twice a month, but it was really once a month. The other money had to go to her bills. And it always fell a couple of days after the due date. So if you don't make the money by the due date, they're supposed to move you out the dorms. And this is a fact. Mr. Thrift would come on Fridays to get a list of kids that got to leave because they didn't make their payment on time. And he would always be like, yo, I didn't see you. He would walk Friday when he left his office, I didn't see you today. In other words, I'm going to let you stay here for the weekend because I know your mom's going to be able to make the payment Tuesday. Now, say if I was a person causing trouble in that dorm, say if I was a person disrespecting this adult in that dorm, say if I was a person that wasn't taking advantage of my education, he might not have made that same decision for me. So the relationships, right? That's what it's about. And I think that helps sometimes because my mom was like, thank you, Mr. Thrift. So all my 4 years there, I don't live on campus no more, obviously. But every time I saw him, my smile to him was from that. Mind you, when I first met him, I was like, this down south dude is, take off your hat, say hi, yes, sir, no, sir. I thought he was like a jerk. That ended up being one of I used to go visit him all the time in between my classes because of that one time or those 2 times he said, don't worry about it. That makes a difference. But the tuition management system, for me, the payment plans is what helped me. And a lot of times we front like we got money and stuff, and we be needing that payment plan. That's what helped on top of getting jobs, on top of trying to get grants. So like I said before, you got to make the opportunity and not make the excuses and go look for it. You get what I'm saying? Because you never know who you speak to or who you disrespect could be that key to that door that you need to get through. So I pass it to the 2 queens and let them speak to their experience.
I thought you were gonna say something about my illustrious university, but I should have known that. I appreciate the queen as well too, but I thought you were gonna say to that the real orange and green in our shared colors here. But yeah, I think that the relationship part is very much so important, because that the piece that when I'm doing college fairs and telling young people about how to make it work is going to be like the things. Yes, they got hip to moving and getting the in-state address and whatnot, but there's also things that there are opportunities where if you're doing the conversations and doing the extra effort to find the money, there's money, that is there. There are a lot of folks that like don't understand that social capital, building relationships. So we're in the schools right now talking to our young people about why it's important to have relationships with their teachers and the self-advocacy and for the things like how Scudder just mentioned. And it's the same kind of way, because once you're in the school and you're the kid that is doing well in class, like I stayed on the dean's list like all 4 of my years, I think, for like 1 semester and whatnot. And so there was money that I was able to receive. I came into school with some local scholarships and whatnot, but the rest of the time I had to finagle a bagel and figure out what those things were. And thankfully, like my parents were able to support, but they didn't get like paid for my tuition, where they just got to the point that said, hey, both my parents in their highest level of education are doctoral students, all right? They both have their doctorates and from here in Mass. So they were like, you already got to take that loan. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a way like for that with the short money is that I could come up with. And like my mom from Relationships and the Hustle was in her doctoral program here in Mass. And because of the relationships and the same type of research she had to do, she was a principal for BPS and got school, like found enough money to have her doctorate paid for. And there were people to her right and left that she was like, they were like, oh, she had to keep that on the hush at the time, or not the hush, would be like, hey, how are you doing it? But it was the hustle. So it's the same kind of thing. And it's like, if we know, if we network, if we do that extra research, we'll find the ways to make stuff work. But I also feel like loans are horrible, yes, but heck, Obama and Michelle talked about just paying off their loans and getting the loans like once they were in office as president. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's kind of like the nature of the beast, and we shouldn't use it as a deterrent for if kids want to go to school. And like, because sometimes the schools they end up at just because they could afford to go there, they gave the money, aren't feeding that kid's soul and their dreams, or giving them the skill set to do what they need to do to even achieve a better life on the other end. So it's like we got to think long term in that way. And I say that in coaching as well too. A lot of my kids I'm trying to push right now to like, yo, look at HBCUs. There's Division I scholarships that are there, but the same kind of thing. They want to go to the big name schools, the ones that they know, the ACC, the SEC, the ones, and yes, some of them are granted to it, but a lot of this other movement, when you see some of these athletes that are saying, hey, they're making HBCUs be relevant right now. A lot of those energies that are there. So you're like, oh, there's scholarship opportunities. There's academic scholarships. I was just remembering some research and looking up on Fans Campus. There was a time where we got more national merit scholars than Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, because we had those dope level of young people that were looking at the schools and were able, and they got that money, baby, but they came and chose to use those scholarships at this HBCU. You know what I'm saying? Because of their academic success. And like, but we don't hear those stories about HBCUs. But when we talk about Black folks and the degrees that HBCUs produce, in terms of the most doctors, lawyers, whatever in front it is, those are folks that they chose that excellence over worrying about money that the whole world owes the United States government. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we got to get away from deterring our young people by using those scary words about, oh, it's too much money. It's too much money. It's too much money. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's turn the conversation into how we going to get this money so you can go choose a school that's going to, you know what I'm saying, better your future.
I love both of y'all stories. For me, like I told you guys, grew up in the projects, so that means I didn't quite have the concept or understanding of money. So when I seen the big numbers, I was just like, oh, it'll figure itself out. That's all I thought in myself. I was like, it'll figure itself out, because I just had the motivation to literally go to this college. I was just like, I don't care what it takes. And then my mother, she was on some like, you're not going out of state. And I was like, I'm going to start packing, and which I did, and we're going to figure this stuff out. Because I said to myself, everything will figure itself out. And she was very adamant, like, no, I'm my first girl going out to college. My brother got a full ride when he was younger, so she didn't understand why I was even paying for college. But in my brother's position, he got a full scholarship from this rich white man called George Weiss, in this program called Say Yes to Education, when he was in second grade. So it wasn't on some like intelligence stuff. It was just on some, this guy had money to give out, and 50 of them kids got that chance. I wasn't born around that time, so I missed out. I didn't catch the football. So my mom just was like, didn't understand, like, this part costs money after high school, right? Because it was free for since second grade or whatever, kindergarten. So now, long story short, as I'm packing, I have my sneakers with the sneaker box in trash bags. I was like, the sneakers got to come, because, everybody's sneakerheads at the time. And then she kind of just like took that L with me and was like, all right, let's go get you a fridge. And I was like, here we go. Because I was very like, I don't know how I'm even getting there, but the sneakers and a couple of these coats is coming with me. I'm going to go figure this out. And then I met my father when I was about 14, 15 years old. And at this time, I'm 17, and he's trying to, build a relationship. So I left up, and I was like, well, the only way that's going to be, the only building relationship that's going to happen here is you putting up the money. So I was like, he's in Jersey, he drives down, and the car's loaded up. Again, I have no concept. I don't know. I'm looking at this package that comes in the mail. I was like, all right, I see a couple scholarships in there. I don't know. I see these loans. I don't know what that means, but we go into Pennsylvania. I don't care. So we roll through Pennsylvania, and, the first day, you know what the first day is like. Everybody in HBCU knows what the first day is like. You're in that line, and you better have gotten some lunch or something, because you're going to be there all day. I finally get to the point where I'm talking to Coach Jay. Everybody got this coach, like title at the schools and stuff. So I'm talking to Coach Jay. They give me my statement, and I'm like, 10 G's. I didn't know I was gonna have. I was like, But I've already had my stuff in the dorm, so it was on some like, we're gonna figure this stuff out. And so my father, mother, they figured it out. Payment plan. My mom, Haitians always have some stash. They always have a stash that they don't talk about. And that stash was for me. So thankfully, my mom was able to do some payment plans. So that was like my freshman year. And then after that, I was a walk-on for the volleyball team. I tried out. I was like, all right, there goes some scholarship money there. And then I found out there was a bowling team the following year. I picked up that ball and I threw it down the lane, and I was like, we gonna figure this stuff out. And they gave me scholarship there, and then I was like, whatever it takes to kind of close that gap, because that was important to me. And then, there's always like this weird, like in one semester, there's always like, why do I owe so much money? I thought I had it, right? And so there was that weird moment, and then somehow, some way, it was at zero, like the following day after crying. I was like, where am I going to find $4K? But it was gone, because I also built relationship in the financial aid office. I got a work-study job in the financial aid office. I was like, first off, I need to go where the money's at. Like, there's no, like, if or ands or buts. Like, I'm far away from home. I need to build relationship in here, because this is where I learned how money flows in and out, because I did not have the concept of money. And from that experience, I also was able to get a job, like a couple of years after graduating from college, as a financial aid advisor at a local college. And I was like, that experience helped me. You know what I mean? Because he was like, there's not a lot of black women who does this job, and there's a lot of white women who does this. You can do this. This is simple work. And I was like, say no more. I'll figure it out. So that's my, I took the debt and it was worth it. I don't regret having debt, and I don't regret making my father pay that money, and I don't regret any of my experiences because it made me, you know what I mean? And I'm thankful at the end of the day of my mother for just, sticking it out with me.
No
If I had a
doubt.
piece about the loans too,
Yeah. Go ahead.
paying the difference, because I think a lot of times we see the number of the entire year, and we look at that's the loan we got to get. You got to take the loan for what can't, like, almost like a supplement too, because I think that's what we was doing as well. We was taking like, all right, we can cover this cost and take the loan out for that, which makes your loan debt a lot lower after college. And then summer jobs, because that's a piece. There's a lot of people that work summer jobs, double jobs in the summertime because we're off. We get a head start when you're in college on summer jobs because you're home a little earlier. And then I don't like to promote this, but I'm gonna be honest. At HBCUs, the Army National Guard is how a lot of people pay for their college. They would do 1 month a year and 1 weekend or 2 weekends a month or something and pay for it. Unfortunately, a lot of them end up having to serve overseas afterwards. But a lot of my network that didn't have the money, that had no, didn't have a lot of loan money, or wasn't academic scholars or athletes. Some of them joined the military, and I always say that should be maybe your last option unless you look forward to having a federal job or doing something, in that branch. But that's something I see a lot of people do that aren't playing sports and that don't have scholarships. A lot of people do that, and that's why I said in the South you see a lot of the military and the college is what keeps the economy going. But that's the piece that I want to throw in there because those loans, I think a lot of people look at the total what you got to pay per year, and not the supplement. I can afford this much, so that's what we did. We would take the loan out for what we couldn't afford on that TMS, TPP or whatever you want to call that. Your school's TMS at mine, but I just wanted to throw that in there to supplement because people forget about that part. The money that you put down on the car, you take the loan for the rest. You can almost do the same thing with college. So just the financial plan.
Yeah, one of the things I also wanted to highlight was just all you guys emphasize building relationships while you're on campus, and for like our listeners and students and just people that don't know anything about colleges and that are listening, is that really building these relationships no matter where you're at is a good thing, but especially when you're on campus because and you're black,
Yeah.
because a lot of the times we are the first doing everything, and so to have someone to look out for you or to make things a little bit easier on the campus, whether you're on the HBCU and especially if you're on the PWI, it's easier to get by if you have these relationships in place. Um, but moving on to our sixth question. Um, So, in what ways can we support HBCUs moving forward in our practice? This year, this season, we are focused on advocacy and kind of bringing to light certain things that are practical, that we can do, that we can share with our listeners about certain ways that we can help different people or like these different organizations. So, in your perspective, what ways can we support HBCUs moving forward, or our listeners can help? We can start off with Jihad, then go on to Courtney, then Manushka.
Spread the word, spread the positive images, reiterate the importance of it, add value to it. And by adding value to it is make sure you turn out to be a person of value. So people see the value in you and you can trace it back through that bloodline or what your trail was to success. Make sure it's not a silent conversation, because it was a silent conversation. Even though we saw it on TV, we didn't really know a lot of people that went to those schools. the shirt was a fashion thing that we saw on TV. So just make sure you spread that word and your representation of that school. Because when you hear the confidence and the pride that people have, it's something that kind of can't be taught. It's something that you have to embody. When I see, Courtney, all the time I see FAMU in some way, form, or fashion. There's always a plug, and we do that for. And it's not, not coming at no one, but we do that for Jordan. We do that for Nike. We do that for Adidas. We do that for Tommy Hilfiger. We do these plugs, right? We hashtag our clothes, and that's what I'm wearing. But it's cool when we do it for the things that represent us as well. And actually, we should always do that. So I just think that is the biggest plug, is be the product of it and let people know you're a product of it, not through just what you're wearing, but through like your inner grace. Let them see that, like, wow, even if they identify that one thing you did, they might think if they go to that place or they grew up, that they attend that school, I might be like my mentor. We have to do that because they're constantly they fund those other institutions fund it by making that ball player come to their school, by having them score the touchdown and showing that image all the time in a commercial, and then the endorsements that they get, they're promoting that way. So when you're in these classrooms, these mentor programs, when you're on the trains, the buses, in your travels, let them see that image too. You know what I'm saying? Be the person that speaks. I had to learn that. That was the biggest lesson I learned from an HBCU, is to speak to people when you see them. Because I was from Boston. I don't know you up north. You can always tell the up north people, I don't know you like that. I'm not speaking. And you can tell the people from the South or at the HBCU, how you doing? What's up? You looking at them, they got to say what's up to you twice because you like, what's up? They're like, no, what's up? Like, how you doing? And you don't realize it till you come back home and you saying what's up and people looking at you like you're crazy. So I think that's something that we got to do, is almost bring home what we got from those places, from your second home, so that people can experience that. If they don't go to those HBCUs, like y'all said, y'all can experience that joy and that confidence through us. It's because y'all still our people. You're still family. And we're not saying anything negative about your educational background. But now that you know that, make the next person aware, because our guidance counselors didn't make that aware for us. Our school, my school in particular, put undecided because they had never heard of, at the time we would say Virginia State College on the SATs, and then say Virginia State University. They didn't know anything about that school, so they didn't promote it. So my goal when I came home was to promote that to everyone around me. I joined the National Black College Alliance. I pushed that to everyone around me. So my kids, now anything that comes on TV, Virginia State, my dad went there, because these kids say, my dad went to Harvard. My dad went to Yale. We went to, right? There's this confidence that comes. You didn't even go there. I have confidence when I speak of it. We got to indoctrinate the same things to our kids, right? So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would co-sign on all of that. And I think that the most powerful place, since this is straight out of BPS, right? As educators and folks in the schools, it's corny, not as corny, but it's cliche. Sometimes they say, oh, education, what's the quote, the education is a passport to the future, right? Like, we have the power to make that experience of what we hear and know about HBCUs in our classrooms, and educate our young people, so so they think of them as options. Jihad talks a lot about how much he's poured into his kids about what his experience was. And I feel as educators or people in the building with young people every day, Black and brown children at that these conversations, that bringing HBCUs to the forefront, if we're guidance counselors, we're folks that are making admissions conversations, if you're teaching kids about the FAFSAs and SATs and all that HBCUs got to be part of the conversation. And especially more than the PWIs, for the fact that we're in a place in time right now where our affirmation and our growth is like, it's evident that when kids see people that look like them, whether you're white, Black, brown, whatever it is, when you can relate to something, then you're more likely to want to achieve what that is, right? We keep hearing that representation matters. And why not? Why aren't we elevating HBCUs as the primary institutions of higher learning for our young people if we really care about them in the way that we do? Because you would say, hey, the system we talk about fails Black and brown children. The prison, the pipe school to prison pipeline, all the ways that we can't control the bigger economic education system. But what we can control are the institutions that is pointing them towards the institutions that we've created, right? We've got a formula there at HBCUs that has proven success all the way to the highest position or career in our country right now. Well, one of the highest, second in command to the United States of America is a product of an HBCU, right? That in itself should prove all the misnomers that we've heard, from financial aid to what HBCUs don't prepare you for real life. They don't, you're not going to be able to be successful out in the real world if you went to an HBCU because it's not blah, 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 the academics aren't there. And now, for no other time, in this time that we're in right now, we're doing a disservice as educators of Black and brown children if we are not having conversations and bringing HBCUs to their purview and educating them around them about these institutions. Almost as much as it's disgraceful to not have kids learn about Black history until they're in college, having your first African-American studies class, or, at this point, like, that's disrespectful, right? And so it's like the same thing, we got to treat the HBCU conversation in that same way, and to be able to support the institutions. One of the biggest things we talked about is the disadvantage economically that a lot of HBCUs are at. So we see the celebrities now pouring money in or dropping money here and there. Some of us are getting more money, our institutions, than others and whatnot, and more attention, but we can't negate that financial piece. Just like we'll give to some other organizations or nonprofits or things that, we believe in, that like we got to start treating HBCUs as all of our responsibilities, whether I went there or not. If you're a Black person that got some money, you should be hooking up HBCUs. I almost got upset with Dr. Dre when he gave millions to USC, because that's where whatever his thing is, and he ain't even a full thing. But like, we got to flip the narrative on, keeping these things alive that are doing so much for, spreading the culture and uplifting Black excellence. And so that's what I would say. Like, we got to look at things like that.
Could you just state that question one last time so I can hear it?
Absolutely. In what ways can we support HBCUs moving forward in our campus?
All right, so for sure, other than wearing, different sweaters and doing that Cosby stuff, I think it's really important to show a pathway, right? And what I mean by that is, if a student says that they want to be an engineer, we need to be able to literally say, yeah, you can go to that PWI, but you can also do this, take these courses, do this, take this, apply for this scholarship, and look at these several schools, reach out to some people at these schools from these HBCUs, because they all have engineering programs as well. And then even contact some alumni and just see like what they ended up doing afterwards. And then like literally and figuratively showing young people, or even adults, you can still get your master's at an HBCU or your doctorates at an HBCU, it doesn't matter. But like showing how it's possible is extremely important right now, to be able to paint the picture. Right now, everybody's real visual about things. And I think like with your podcast, this is a great first step in introducing people or reintroducing people to HBCUs. And if you were to take another step towards this, it's like, showing or sharing with young people their potential or their future, and just saying like, you can literally be whatever you want if you ended up going to an HBCU. Like, you could do it. It's possible, and showing that it is possible. I think that's like I would say that's the most important thing when it comes to influence, is showing them, how to get there and how to stay there and finish there, and then progress from there, right? And what does progression look like if they end up going there? And I feel like what we kept echoing is that there's this sense of confidence that we all have, and you can hear it in our voices, that we have from our experience at an HBCU. It doesn't even matter which one. And I feel like, and it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're all pretty happy people at this point, right? We're proud of where we're at in life. It seems like it. I can hear it in your voices. So I'm just gonna probably speak for you, but correct me if I'm wrong on this side. But I just think that, you know, young people need to be able to see the product of an HBCU, and they're getting that with your podcast, but they can continue to get that by showcasing more people, more voices, of individuals who've been there, done that at an HBCU.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's so dope. Um, like I see what you're saying from like seeing it, like, you know, you see or you hear about it on TV, but seeing the person having those conversation. And Gia brought up family, like, you know, when you say contacting those people, I'm like, yo, if one of our students contacts somebody wants to HBCU, I can see like the like enthusiasm. Oh yeah, I want to talk to you, like, you know, about this, like, you know, definitely. Um, yeah, we're trying to do our best to change the positive narrative, avoid the stigma, and also, like, you know, it's uh I like to quote Ja. Ja, I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast, but in our last episode, you said so many dope stuff. I think it's hard when one of the favorite things you say is that when you're part of the system and you're trying to change the thing in the system. So when we started in the system, we embodied the views of the system, and we start thinking like, oh, how was that detriment to our culture, to our student? And now as we in the system, like, you know, it's time. So like we want to change the narrative. We want to approach is and our practice HBCU a different way, a positive way. We want to model it the right way. We want to connect students to alumni so they can see that confidence and be able to like see like you said, product, like, you know, of an HBCU. Now we get to the part that I'm excited for. So it's our last question. You get to put your HBCU on. Why should student go there? Share fun fact, any attraction, and so on. Like, you're on the spot, your school, you repping your school. Why should your student go there? And no pun intended, as the first HBCU, Manusha gets to go first. Then we're gonna go to Courtney and Jihad. So the floor is yours.
All right. So, you know, when you do attend an establishment that is founded and for people like us, and let's say we're the reason why other colleges and universities, other historically Black colleges and universities exist, it's really important to continue that legacy on that campus, because now you will be associated with I'm not going to say an elite community, but you will be associated with a group of people who don't really have to explain themselves as much. Okay, but what I will say is, I'm not even going to. I know we're supposed to plug it, but I'm not going to plug that particular college. I want to plug all of them, because I would have ended up anywhere as long as it was an HBCU. I did not care. It helped that I found the first one and I wanted to be associated with the first one, right? It helped. But again, I would have went to any one of them. If I applied to all 13 and I got into all 13, I would have literally fishbowled it and pulled one out the pot, and I would have just said I was going. Regardless of the fact I was going to an HBCU, I was going to graduate from one. It was very like a clear image in my head that I was going to have Black professors. And ironically enough, one of my professors in the past, Dr. Zoe, ended up at BSU. So it's like it's cool connection to know, like, you know, in this moment right here, it's like we shared a professor probably down the line, and she's like one of the most amazing professors there are, you know, on this planet. So no particular plug. I just want whoever's listening to just go to one and don't look back.
Speaking like a true first, who wants more?
I feel that Manushka down there. When you're the first, we have to pay homage to the original Dundadas and whatnot. And y'all have folks like the infamous first, the most important probably coach in Black women's coaching history. Y'all can come to see Vivian Stringer as one of your historical history makers. So y'all got that. And that's my biggest reason for knowing Cheney too. When you talk about HBCUs though, like, yes, I'm promoting them all, but the illustrious Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, founded in 1887 on the highest of 7 hills in the capital of Florida, Tallahassee. It's an institution like no other. I could run our list of most notable FAMU alumni, but the closest to Massachusetts right now that y'all might know is like the president of Converse, Mr. Scott Uzel, Dr. Ibram Kendi, the king of anti-racism right now, that's over at BU, and then my sister, Dr. Mitchell, that just joined the ranks at Northeastern, is heading their School of Journalism, Communications, Research, blah, blah, blah. She's a sister from FAMU. So there's already Massachusetts connections here and whatnot. But I think for FAM and any other HBCU, like I talked to, the climate, the culture, some of the biggest things that are happening at FAMU, right, are like right now in terms of the modernization of those Black college campuses. When we talk about, we think that HBCUs don't have money, they don't have nice things there, or like, especially for athletes, I'm always with an athlete's brain, that you think you can't go to HBCU because you're not going to get the same kind of experience. I feel like FAM has been able to make a lot of headway in the last few years in beautifying the campus and the technologies and just making it a state-of-the-art campus with programming in colleges. I think there's over like 14 or 15 colleges in terms of majors and things that you can go into, right? That folks are always like, oh, I can't study this there, I can't study that there. And I feel like FAM is one of the larger HBCUs that's providing an experience and an educational experience for any and everybody who wants to go from Ivy League to traditional PWIs. Like, you can't look at FAM and say, oh, I can't do that there because it's a HBCU. I just say, if you're gonna go Black, you know what I'm saying? You gotta go down to the 850, baby.
Woo, so as again, they always say the best for last. So that says a lot in itself. And I want to start off.
That is breaking up over here. Can't hear you. What happened?
Y'all can hear me? Y'all can hear me? But if you can't hear me, I mean, you can see me. You know what I'm saying? So, I do in all seriousness want to say, like, definitely check out all HBCUs, because you always say it like, oh, well, college isn't for everybody, but there is a college for everybody. So I feel the same about HBCUs, all, in all seriousness, like, definitely checking out, because one school might be, most of us are good in agriculture, but a lot of us have different things. There's a lot of engineers, a lot of the USDA, a lot of the FDA, a lot of those people actually come from HBCU. So always look into it. But if you have to make your final decision, I want to speak from the chest or from my heart, and always push VSU. You know what I mean? I eat it to a point where it's on my stomach. You get what I'm saying? And then if I'm thinking a certain way, I'm gonna put on Virginia State, because I want to think like a Trojan.
Got the gear.
Right, you know what I mean? And when I come to embrace somebody else, they're under my armpit too. You feel me? So then when I leave the building, they got my back too. So always gonna rep Virginia State University. And like some other schools, we've been around for a long time, but we also gave birth to another school called Norfolk State University. So whenever you go down south on Labor Day to Virginia, you have the Labor Day Classic. Think about in 1969, there was a school that broke away from Virginia State College called Norfolk State College that ended up turning to Norfolk State University. That originally started as a 2-year school, which was a branch of Virginia State, which was in the 757. So not only were we a great school, we gave birth to another great school. And you can't, people like to talk about how great they are. but sometimes you got to show who you made great. You get what I'm saying? So,
Woo!
you know, I want to end it off the right way because I'm a Virginia State University Trojan for life. And I always push that because it's just something that changed my life. And in all seriousness, I got into other schools. I got into Morehouse. I got into Hampton. And I always tell people what made me go to Virginia State. A bell went off at the top of the hill. And that reminded me, literally, like a bell went off. There's no one on campus. A bell went off. And I was like, yeah, this reminds me of Harvard. It was like a movie to me. So that's the only thing that made me go there. And it was the best decision I made in my life. But support your HBCUs. And I can't always say local because up north it's not local like that until you get to like Philly. But support your HBCUs because it doesn't matter which one you pick as long as it caters to what your experience needs to be and what you're interested in. So like she said, when you do engineering and stuff like that, whatever it is, if it's something that you're interested in, look into it because there is a school for you. And I want to highlight one thing that Courtney did earlier this year was she did a forum for middle schoolers around HBCUs, where she had certain HBCUs in different rooms. So even through the remote learning, we had like something like this. It was forums with different schools. And even connecting the dots, my sister was one of the people that was on the panel that went to Hampton. She ended up connecting with someone else that went to Hampton through Courtney that she never met in all her years of, you know, being at Hampton and involved. So that's what I'm saying. Even someone from FAMU connected the dots for, you know, two people from Hampton. And, you know, Maniska mentioned a doctor going down or a professor going down to Virginia State. So it just says there's a circle and there's a network that exists that we don't know. And our spirit has to be that vibranium in Wakanda, if that makes sense. So we kind of got to push that type of narrative. And even though we push our schools, that's like the friendly competition. In my house, you know, this month it's like, my mother's like, which homecoming am I going to go to? We got to push that because we need that to be our conflict. Yeah. We need that to be our competition, not each other as people. And I think our people have suffered enough and long enough based off of our differences that don't matter. These differences matter because what they got at their schools is something that I didn't get at my school, but there's a connection. So even in our differences, you see likeness. And I think that's just something we got to push in our communities in general, learning from, learning around, and teaching to the people that look like you, because ultimately it's going to impact you. And maybe I may not be able to do something for my kids that somebody that I taught might be able to do for my children later. You get what I'm saying? The people in my community. So that's what I want to push. No matter what school you go to, what institution of higher learning, make sure you look into your HBCUs first. Start with your own and then look into everybody else. You got to fix home first. So I ended off with that, but the plug is here.
Yeah. Well, that puts an end to our episode. Thank you guys for joining us. Think it's just a great conversation. We hope you guys learn from it. We hope you guys, we need to promote HBCUs, be HBCU friendly, talk about it, be about it. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah.
Always remember, FAMU first.
We'll be right back for our final thought.
Welcome back. We are here with our final reflections. What an episode. What an episode.
Yes.
So
a lot of energy.
I know, so much energy. It just brought me back to my college days. And, you know, one of the things I mentioned in the episode was like, when I see HBCU alumni interact, it's a different energy.
It is.
But it doesn't, one of the things that Jihad was saying is just like, it's for the betterment of our community. And like, just like he was a part of a fraternity, but the other two young ladies were not. But it's the same type of energy. But I'm just like, we should have that within the Black community within itself. You know what I mean? So it just made me think about everything on a whole different level. And just some of we don't really hear those voices heard as far as all like students that are alumni from HBCUs. Like, I don't see really a lot of people doing that. And I think that's something that that needs to be heard. And I'm so glad we had an opportunity to speak to them.
Yeah, I think Jad said along the. I think that something like it's not cockiness, it's confidence.
Yes.
Um, and then Courtney brought up, like, when we see, like, we so happy when we see, like, Ayanna Presley, like, her wins,
Yeah.
how she advocating for us, like, they talk about, like, celebrating the first black president. They're like, it's like that every day, like,
Yeah.
in HBCU. So, like, that black excellence is 24/7,
Yeah.
promoting, uplifting, supporting one another, like, and how the network. There was one of the questions we asked about, like, what they feel like they got from HBCU that they wouldn't have gotten from
Mm-hmm.
PWI. And one of the things that is that the network is as strong, is not even stronger than the
Yeah.
Ivy League. And Manushka touched on that, like, when you're being challenged by somebody who look like you.
Yeah.
And Jihad touched on the family part, like, it's a family. There was
Yeah.
a video of a president like crossing a student challenge the president, and then the president crossed him real bad, and it went viral. And the administration relationship to student is like, you go to PWI student, you never know who the president is, like, and what they do. There's no interaction, and the involvement is definitely like that family level, like, the interaction, how they hold each other down. So we wanted to share those positive story, because, like, and everything you do, there's the positive and the negative.
Yeah.
And Courtney brought it up, like, when it's, for some reason, when it has to do with black and brown people
It's
stuff,
heightened.
the black is like at the top, like
Yeah.
that's what's being promoted. So we wanted to change it, and we know, so HBCU don't give a lot of financial aid
Yeah.
because they don't get enough funding as their white counterpart.
Yep.
So how did they make it work? So please listen to the podcast. We need to, as educators in our practice, we need to change the narrative. We need to support those HBCU. We need to create strategy for students to see
Yep.
themselves at those HBCUs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing that you said, just like what Manushka was saying, is like, if you're having a student come to you, right, saying that wants to go to HBCU,
Yeah.
let's formulate a plan
Yep.
or like a guide to help them get there. Not just saying, oh, they're not going to give you enough money. It's our job to kind of help the younger generation to help formulate a plan.
Yeah.
Please, 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 again, share this, play it in classrooms. Just we strongly, this is a part of our advocacy.
Yeah.
So, as with that being said, this is Straight Outta BPS
Podcast.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.